June 20th, 1944, aboard the USS Enterprise in the Philippine Sea. A young officer, Lieutenant Saburo Kitamura of the Japanese Navy, was standing in the crew's dining area. His hands were trembling as he held a tray piled with more food than his whole unit had seen in 3 days. There was fried chicken, mashed potatoes covered in butter, green beans, white bread, apple pie, and a glass of cold milk. An American sailor working the food line, annoyed by the holdup, motioned restlessly toward the ice cream counter. "Do you want chocolate or vanilla?" The question was confusing. Ice cream wasn't a thing on battleships. You're watching The Valor Unveiled, where the hardest orders forge the greatest courage. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments where you're tuning in from. And if stories of heroes appearing in the darkest hour thrill you, then hit subscribe. Because we're just getting started. Ice cream needed cooling systems that fighting ships couldn't afford to use. But here, on America's toughest aircraft carrier, enemy prisoners were being given a choice of frozen treats. Kitamura had been rescued from the Philippine Sea just 4 hours before. He was one of 43 Japanese flyers picked up during the huge air battle known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. He anticipated being killed, or at the very least, starved and hurt. The Japanese government's information had been very clear. Americans were savages who ate their captives, monsters who enjoyed causing pain. Instead, medics had cared for his injuries, given him medicine for the pain, and were now offering him ice cream. That question, chocolate or vanilla, would stick with him for many years. It was the moment his view of the war, of America, and of everything else started to fall apart. Throughout the war in the Pacific, around 35,000 Japanese servicemen would become prisoners of the American Navy and see a level of plenty that destroyed everything they had been told about their enemy's supposed weakness. They found carriers where regular sailors ate better than Japanese admirals, where machines made endless fresh water from the sea, and where ice cream machines ran all the time, even during combat. These experiences with the American Navy's supply system would tear down the core beliefs of the Japanese military's way of thinking more completely than any loss in a fight. The simple math of this naval plenty was seen in calories and abilities. While Japanese sailors lived on rice balls and pickled vegetables, American crews ate 4,100 calories a day of different fresh foods. While Japanese carriers passed around airplane fuel by hand, American ships used machines for everything. While the Japanese Navy prayed for heavenly winds, the U.S. Navy created its own weather with cooling, air conditioning, and ice cream at sea. The change started the moment Japanese survivors were brought onto American ships. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, the planner of the Pearl Harbor attack who later became a Christian preacher in America, wrote about his rescue in 1945 on the USS Missouri. "They pulled me up like a caught fish and I got ready to die. Instead, a medical officer checked my wounds while a sailor brought me coffee. Real coffee, hot with sugar and cream. I hadn't had coffee since 1942. The sailor said he was sorry they were out of donuts. This casual comment about a low donut supply, while Japanese soldiers were eating their own leather belts, showed the huge gap between what they were told and the truth. The Japanese Navy's own records, found after the war, revealed that by 1944, regular sailors got about 1,400 calories a day when food was available. Protein mostly came from fish when boats had enough fuel to go fishing. Lack of vitamins was widespread. Sicknesses like beriberi, scurvy, and trouble seeing at night troubled the men. In comparison, American Navy meals had fresh meat every day, frozen vegetables, fresh baked bread, milk products, eggs for breakfast, and many choices of drinks. The Office of Naval Records shows that dining halls on large carriers in 1944 served about 15,000 meals a day, with menus that changed and had dozens of choices. Tuesday might be roast beef, Thursday could be fried chicken, and Sunday might be ham with pineapple. Japanese prisoners, used to the same rice meals every day, couldn't understand this variety on a ship. The shock grew when the prisoners saw the living areas for the regular crew. Petty Officer Kazuo Sakamaki, taken from a submarine at Pearl Harbor and America's first Japanese prisoner of war, later wrote about his wonder at the American submarine's features. The enemy submarines had showers with hot water. The men slept in beds with mattresses and clean sheets. They had a library with books and magazines. The dining hall had a coffee pot that was never empty. They lived better under the water than we did on land. The presence of ice cream machines on American warships had a particularly powerful blow to their minds. The Japanese Navy thought ice cream was impossible at sea, a special treat that took up resources no fighting ship could give up. But by 1943, the U.S. Navy had floating ice cream factories. The USS Lexington's ice cream maker could produce 500 gallons a day. Concrete barges were turned into ice cream boats that made 5,000 gallons in a single shift. When the USS Lexington was hit by a torpedo and tilting, sailors leaving the ship were said to have saved the ice cream before getting off. Japanese prisoners saw American repair crews, tired from putting out fires and stopping floods, get ice cream sundaes as their battle food. The mental conflict was too much to handle. Their country, fighting to survive, couldn't give basic food to its men. The enemy, who they were told was spoiled and weak, gave ice cream to its sailors in the middle of a fight. Chief Petty Officer Yoshio Yamada, taken prisoner when his destroyer went down at Leyte Gulf, was on the USS Iowa for 3 days before being moved to a camp on land. His secret diary, found many years later, said, "The battleship's crew eats in turns, but the food is always there. They have machines that peel potatoes, slice bread, and make ice. The kitchen is open 24 hours. They threw out more food after one meal than my whole ship got in a week." When I asked why they wasted so much, a guard laughed and told me, "It's not waste if you have an endless supply." The laundry rooms shocked Japanese prisoners who were used to washing their clothes in the ocean. American carriers had large washing machines, dryers, and pressing machines. Regular sailors got clean uniforms twice a week. Fresh water, extremely valuable on Japanese ships where men often couldn't bathe for weeks, was used freely for showers, laundry, and cleaning. The water purifiers on the USS Enterprise could make 140,000 gallons of fresh water every day, more than the whole Japanese carrier fleet could make together. The entertainment options on American carriers seemed like an impossible story to the Japanese military way of thinking. Ships had movie theaters showing Hollywood films, libraries with thousands of books, gyms with basketball courts, and hobby rooms for building things. The USS Enterprise's newspaper, printed every day at sea, had sports results, comics, and news from home. Japanese carriers had places for meditation and small shrines. American carriers had soda fountains that served milkshakes. Lieutenant Commander Takeshi Maeda, captured after his Zero airplane was shot down over Iwo Jima, was on the USS Bunker Hill for 2 weeks. He later told American questioners, "Your regular sailors live better than our officers. They have radios in their rooms, pictures of their girlfriends, and packages from home with chocolate and cigarettes. They complain about food that would be a feast for our admirals." One sailor threw away a candy bar because it was a little melted. That candy bar had more sugar than a Japanese pilot saw in months. The medical center showed another huge difference. Japanese naval medicine was focused on getting wounded men back to their duties, no matter their condition. American medical bays treated enemies with the same top-level care as their own sailors. Operating rooms on carriers had X-ray machines, blood storage, and surgical tools as good as hospitals on land. Medicines, especially penicillin, seemed like a miracle to Japanese medical staff who saw infected wounds heal in days instead of causing death in weeks. Pharmacist's mate second class Robert Wagner, who worked on the USS Intrepid, later remembered treating Japanese prisoners. "They couldn't believe we would waste medicine on our enemies." One pilot with a very infected leg injury kept trying to say no to the treatment, saying, "Save it for the Americans." I had to show him our medical supply room, cabinets full of sulfa, penicillin, and morphine, to prove to him that we had plenty. He started to cry. The repair areas showed America's industrial power at sea. Japanese ships had to struggle back to home ports for any major repairs. American ships fixed themselves while at sea. Floating dry docks, repair ships, and carrier machine shops could create replacement parts, fix engines, and build completely new pieces of equipment. The USS Enterprise's machine shop could make any part smaller than an airplane engine. The welding shop was always running. The electrical shop rewired systems while the ship was in a battle. When kamikaze attacks grew stronger in 1945, Japanese pilots who lived through crashes saw America's superior damage control up close. Ensign Ryuji Nagatsuka, saved after his damaged Zero, went down near the USS Randolph, watched the carrier's crew fix kamikaze damage while still launching planes. They had a foam that put out fires right away, pumps that took out water faster than it was coming in, metal sheets that covered holes while we watched. The teams worked together perfectly. No one was yelling, there was no confusion. They fixed in a few hours what would have sunk a Japanese carrier. The food-making systems on American carriers were beyond what the Japanese could understand. Bakeries made 15,000 loaves of bread a day. Butcher shops cut up whole cows kept in freezers bigger than Japanese submarines. Ice machines made tons of ice every day for keeping food cold and for drinks. The kitchen on the USS Enterprise used more power than entire Japanese destroyers. Huge steam pots could cook 300 gallons of soup at one time. Electric mixers, automatic dishwashers, and machine potato peelers did the work of dozens of Japanese sailors. Supply ships showed the last part of America's great plenty. Japanese Navy groups waited for months to get new supplies and often got only a small part of what they needed. American carrier groups got supplies every week while at sea. Fuel ships moved millions of gallons of fuel. Ammunition ships brought tons of weapons. Storage ships delivered fresh food, mail, new crew members, and nice-to-have items. Lieutenant Minoru Tanaka watched this resupply process from the brig of the USS Hornet. 3 ships came up alongside at the same time. Fuel lines on one side, ammunition on the other, and helicopters bringing mail from above. They moved more supplies in 3 hours than our carriers got in 3 months. The fresh food had lettuce, tomatoes, and fruit. Real fruit. We were fighting for the Emperor on empty stomachs, while Americans ate salads at sea. The mail system especially surprised Japanese prisoners, who were lucky to get 1 letter a year. American sailors got mail every week, even in war zones. V-mail, letters shrunk down on film, came by the thousands. Packages from home had cookies, candy, books, and pictures. The mail call, impossible for Japanese forces far from their home country, kept up American spirits by keeping them in touch with home. Christmas of 1944 had the deepest mental effect. Japanese prisoners on American ships saw holiday parties that were grander than pre-war Japanese New Year celebrations. The menu from the USS Enterprise on December 25, 1944, listed roast turkey with stuffing, ham with pineapple sauce, mashed potatoes, sweet potatoes, cranberry sauce, 3 kinds of vegetables, fresh rolls, 3 types of pie, ice cream, candy, nuts, and coffee. Seaman First Class Hiroshi Nakamura, a prisoner on the USS Saratoga, wrote in a secret diary, "The Americans celebrated their Christmas while we were attacking them. Every sailor got gifts from groups back home, cigarettes, candy, books, razors. The dining hall was decorated with paper and lights. They sang songs and played music. They were happy. We were starving and dying for the Emperor while our enemies celebrated with so much. That was when I knew Japan had already lost." This realization was about more than just food. It changed their whole view of the world, the Yamato spirit. Japan's idea that inner strength could beat a lack of resources fell apart when faced with America's industrial might. Ensign Takeo Yamamoto, taken prisoner at Okinawa, later wrote, "We were told Americans were soft, that their plenty made them weak, but I saw them fight fires for 12 hours, then eat ice cream and go back to the fight. The plenty didn't make them weak. It kept them going. We were the weak ones, pretending that spirit could take the place of food." By the end of the war, Japanese prisoners had seen things they thought were impossible. Carriers that made fresh water from the ocean, ice cream in hot climates, movies at sea, libraries in war zones, hospitals on the water, and machine shops in the middle of a battle. They had tried foods that most Japanese people had never even heard of: hamburgers, hot dogs, milkshakes, apple pie, and chocolate cake. They had seen the plenty of a democracy. Regular men eating the same food as officers. People of all races working together. Enemies getting medical help. When the Japanese prisoners returned home after the surrender, they spread these stories all over Japan. Former prisoners of war became accidental messengers of American plenty. Their stories were stronger than any official information from the occupying forces. They spoke of ships where sailors complained about food that Japanese people would think was a feast, where ice cream was normal, and where regular men lived better than Japanese nobles. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, the planner of Pearl Harbor who saw American plenty firsthand, converted to Christianity and became a missionary. His change from a planner of a surprise attack to a preacher of peace started with that first cup of coffee on the USS Missouri. The Americans had every reason to hate me, to let me die. Instead, they gave me medical care, food, and respect. This richness of spirit was stronger than any weapon. A quick summary from U.S. naval records. Daily calorie intake for a U.S. Navy sailor was 4,300, while for a Japanese Navy sailor, it was about 1,400. Large U.S. carriers could produce 140,000 gallons of fresh water a day. The USS Lexington could make 500 gallons of ice cream daily. The USS Enterprise baked 15,000 loaves of bread each day. Mail was delivered weekly, even in combat. 2 to 3 different movies were shown each week. Laundry was done twice weekly for clean uniforms. And full surgical medical care was available at sea. The Japanese prisoners who saw the American carrier's plenty went back to a ruined country with a game-changing message. The enemy's power didn't come from being cruel, but from being kind. Not from having too little, but from having so much. Not from spirit, but from a great supply system. Their stories helped get Japan ready for the occupation and the changes that followed. They had seen the future, and it tasted like chocolate ice cream served during a battle at sea. The change in these Japanese servicemen, from seeing American naval plenty, is one of history's most complete flips in a way of thinking. Warriors who thought they would die for their emperor instead lived to talk about American ice cream machines. Pilots who tried suicide missions were saved to see the casual plenty of a democracy. Sailors trained for a spiritual war found that having a lot of resources supported, rather than spoiled, the will to fight. In the end, the ice cream machines on American carriers did what bombs could not. They completely destroyed the myths of their military leaders. The soft-serve machines that ran while ships were on fire, the fresh bread baked during fights, the medical help given to enemies. These eye-opening facts changed the Japanese view of American power and their own defeat. They went back to Japan not as beaten warriors, but as people who had seen a level of plenty beyond what they could imagine, bringing truths that would help change their nation from a military empire to a democratic friend. The story shows us that sometimes the biggest wins are not through destruction, but through demonstration, that having plenty can be stronger than weapons, that the way a country feeds its enemies shows its real strength. The Japanese, who couldn't believe American carriers had ice cream machines, learned that democracy's strongest weapon was its power to create plenty, even in wartime, to share that plenty even with its enemies, and to hold on to its humanity even in the heat of battle.